Kanse, I'm Akwesasne. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. King Charles and Queen Camilla are arriving in Ottawa this afternoon to kick off a two-day visit to Canada. An itinerary by Canadian Heritage notes that day one includes the King's arrival at the Ottawa International Airport. King Charles and Queen Camilla will then travel to Lansdowne Park to meet community organizations and the public at 1:50 p.m. Ottawa time. The second stop of the day will be at Rideau Hall at 2:50 p.m., where the couple will take part in a public ceremonial tree planting and also meet privately with Prime Minister Mark Carney and Governor General Mary Simon. We will bring you more on this event in our evening newscast. The Chiefs of Ontario have gathered at Queen's Park this morning to voice their concern and opposition towards Ontario's Bill 5, a bill that was created by the Doug Ford government in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threat that would, quote, protect Ontario by unleashing our economy. Grand Chief Leo Friday and Ontario Regional Chief Abram Benedict spoke before the Standing Committee to oppose Bill 5. They expressed their deep concern about the lack of consultation, threats to the land and water, and disregard for treaty rights between First Nations in Ontario. This morning, they called on the province of Ontario to halt the bill and commit to a true partnership with First Nations. The chief said they are not opposed to development, but are opposed to doing things the wrong way, and said the last time a bill like this was passed resulted in Idle No More. In a statement, Grand Chief Leo Friday added, "You come into our lands where we survive on the waters and the land without speaking to us. This is like what was done to our people before our lands were taken. You're repeating that same history. This weighs heavily on my heart. If we're going to have legislation, we need to sit down together and create something that works for everyone." APTN News will have more on this in our evening newscast. United States President Donald Trump launched a trade war on Canada back in February. He previously stated that the tariffs were to pressure Canada to take its border security more seriously. The Canadian-American border runs through the Mohawk community of Akwesasne. With pressure on the border from the Trump administration, our APTN reporter Savannah Craig went to see if this community's sovereignty has been impacted.
Obviously, it's the starting of the 45th parallel.
This is not just any ordinary stone in someone's backyard. It shows where the border is. The reality of Akwesasne is that 3 different borders run through it.
If you're on this side, you're in Quebec. If you're on this side, you're kind of into Ontario. And if you step back, you're in New York.
Matthew Rourke is the chief of police for the St. Regis Mohawk Tribal Police, the police force on the New York side of Akwesasne. He says the community is also known for its richness in culture, arts, crafts, and sports. Smugglers take advantage of the border situation. So some know Akwesasne for the bad headlines.
The exploitation of our waterways by a very small number of people that, like less than, I think probably about 1 to 2% exploit that and bring it over certain, anything from the drugs to the migrants and that sort of thing.
Cases of human smuggling have occurred across the Akwesasne border.
Today, 2 additional bodies have been recovered,
With the death of 2 migrant families, 8 in total, on the Quebec side of Akwesasne in March 2023.
I just don't at times appreciate that Akwesasne is looked at as a black hole. It's not.
Recently, there has been a focus from both the United States and Canadian governments to protect the borders following the launch of a tariff war.
The tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
Months ago, U.S. President Donald Trump said he put tariffs on Canada to pressure the country to take its border security more seriously.
Akwesasne, in our history, that border, it was never supposed to affect us.
But it does.
It's challenging at times. We have our governments on both sides and the federal government from the outside. believing that the jurisdiction can come into our community at any point. So it's standing up for our rights for people from Akwesasne to travel freely in and out of our community.
Beverly Cook is the council chief of the St. Regis Mohawk Tribal Council. She says there is concern over Akwesasne maintaining its sovereignty for residents on both the Canada and U.S. side due to lack of communication from the Trump administration.
We think that that's imperative to maintain, a good relationship for our people, not to be worried, because they are worried about how they're going to be treated as they, pass the border frequently every day. And so there's been a lot of concern about how the border is going to, or how the border enforcement is going to impact them.
She says she's ready to have these conversations with the U.S. government.
We are the ones that should be determining citizenship in our own government, and it shouldn't be up to somebody else to impose those restrictions on our peoples.
Until these conversations are had, the St. Regis Mohawk Council and police are working with partners outside of their community to protect the border.
We expect that when other agencies, law enforcement agencies, want to enter the territory, that they're to meet with tribal council, at least notify tribal council. And if they do that through our chief of police, that's fine too, but advance notice is always expected and usually is respected by the outside agencies. So that basically gives us control over who enters the territory. And we, exercise our sovereignty in that way.
Rourke says more funding to the tribal police will help maintain Akwesasne's sovereignty and protect the border.
Times have changed. It's a little different. You have to work with it.
He says the majority of the tribal police's funding comes from the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe's General Fund and from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, as well as grants from other American federal departments.
If we had some more funding opportunities, if this border is going to come out from this new administration, we could buy us more vessels, but also give us an opportunity to hire more police officers so we can have a more persistent and more reliable Marine unit out here, because my team's small.
He says there is competition across American tribes to access funding from the Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation, also known as CTAS.
There's so many other nations who are taking their sovereignty very important and want their own police departments, that the number of people applying are getting bigger, but the pot of money is remaining the same. And that's prior to any administration.
APTN News reached out to the U.S. Department of Justice to request how much money is provided through CTAS for tribal police forces, but it did not respond before a deadline.
I know the elders here, when they do see you, they're going to tell you straight up what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong.
Rourke stresses that these challenges are affecting nearby communities as well.
It happens here, but also got to really stress that it happens in Messina, happens in Alexandra Bay.
Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Akwesasne, Mohawk Territory.
Alberta RCMP have arrested a man who allegedly was offering underage youth money for sex in Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation earlier this month. On Monday, May 5th, Alberta RCMP says 49-year-old Sean Atkinson was in Sturgeon Lake First Nation offering to pay children for sex. Atkinson is now facing 2 charges of sexual assault and 1 charge of obtaining sexual services for consideration by a person under 18. The man was released and is scheduled to make his next court appearance at the Alberta Court of Justice in Valley View on June 19th. Sturgeon Lake First Nation is located about 265 kilometers northwest of Edmonton. Saskatchewan RCMP Major Crimes is investigating a homicide of a child under 10 years old in Shoal Lake Cree Nation. RCMP say as a result of a continued investigation, they have charged 23-year-old Karina Young from Shoal Lake Cree Nation with 1 count of manslaughter. She is scheduled to appear in Melfort Provincial Court today. APTN News is looking more into this story, and we will bring you an update when it becomes available. Shoal Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan is located 240 kilometers east of Prince Albert. About 300 people from Pimichikamak Cree Nation in northern Manitoba remain evacuated this week as fire crews continue to fight a wildfire that has grown to roughly 1,500 hectares in size. As of Sunday evening, Pimichikamak Chief David Monias says the wildfire remains stable and helicopters have been monitoring the area and so far have identified no immediate threats. A hotspot scan is scheduled for today to provide an update on fire activity. Chief Monias says smoke could reach the Cross Lake area, which is a concern. However, air quality is so far manageable. For now, the community members who stayed in Pimichikamak are being asked to remain alert and check on neighbors if they need help and keep an eye out for any updates. Pimichikamak is located about 520 kilometers north of Winnipeg. Meanwhile, the Sandy Bay Ojibwe Nation in Manitoba has a reason to celebrate as 3 baby bison were recently born. They are the first calves of the season, with more expected to be born later this year. The Southern Chiefs organization says the growth of the bison herd across the prairies is a proud achievement for the nation, as a bison holds a special place in First Nation culture, representing strength, survival, and a deep connection to the land. A big congrats to Sandy Bay Ojibwe Nation on the new baby bison. We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. Here's how you can continue the conversation with us. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. And to read and watch our stories, you can go to aptnnews.ca. And you can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. We have to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll tell you about a Gwich'in woman who has become the first lawyer of her community. Stay with us. Welcome back. Children across Canada recently took part in an arts and leadership program focused on how they want to contribute to reconciliation. Indigenous and non-Indigenous students from kindergarten to grade 12 created projects for a chance to receive a micro-grant to see their visions come true. The Imagine a Canada program runs through the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation. It's been going strong since 2016, receiving more than 1,500 submissions since its inception. On Friday, the 31 winning projects for 2025 were honored at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg. 15 were art and essay projects. 16 were reconciliation projects like podcasts or building sharing spaces and murals at schools. Microgrants of $750 to $1,500 were given to make the students' visions a reality. Christine Sear is the University of Manitoba's Associate Vice President Indigenous. She says the ideas of the children's are worth believing in.
This year's Imagine a Canada projects moved me deeply. Sewing clubs, food gardens, podcasts, carvings, murals, essays, songs, art, photography. You didn't just imagine change, you created it. You stepped up and you used your own voice in your own way to take action. Imagine a Canada might sound simple, but it asks something profound. What kind of Canada do you see?
A retired senator is one of 3 Mi'kmaq community members asked to be on an external review committee that will investigate the actions of Department of Fisheries and Oceans officers who left 2 Mi'kmaq fishers stranded in the middle of the night without footwear and cell phones. But former Senator Dan Christmas says he has not yet accepted the appointment. Last year, Blaise Sillyboy and Kevin Hartling were arrested for harvesting elvers when the season was closed. The fishermen say DFO officers seized their boots and cell phones and left them stranded at a gas station in the middle of the night about 200 kilometers from home. An external review committee will investigate the incident and prepare a report with recommendations to the Minister of Fisheries. But Dan Christmas says he has not accepted the position yet because he has concerns these reports have little impact.
I've been in this position many times where I've done many reports. I've even been involved in passing and amending legislation, and government doesn't even honor the legislation that's been duly enacted by Parliament. Well, I've been part of us.
An Indigenous law graduate from Canada's North is celebrating a big accomplishment. Not only did she recently complete her master's degree in law in England, but she's also breaking barriers for her people, and far from home at that. APTN Sarah Connors has that story.
Julian Chapes.
After years of hard work and sacrifices, Julianne Chapese received her Master's of Law degree from the University of Law in Manchester last week. It's a big accomplishment for the 24-year-old, and with good reason. Chapese is the first law graduate of Gwich'in descent.
The odds were obviously against me in that aspect, especially being First Nations, coming from a small community, so I'm very proud to be where I am at this moment in my life.
Chapese was raised 200 kilometers above the Arctic Circle in Nunavik in the Northwest Territories. She originally wanted to become a police officer, but changed her mind when she became interested in politics. She credits her mother, Wanda MacDonald, a former chief operating officer for the Gwich'in Tribal Council, for encouraging her to follow her dreams.
She demonstrated the fact that the long hours that she worked, those are the long hours that I now put in. So she was a role model to how I need to progress to be where I want to be in life.
Of course, law school is no walk in the park. Chapese says she had to put in many hours and late nights to achieve her dream, not to mention the culture shock of moving to another continent. She says most of all, she misses her family.
Those were the sacrifices that I had to make to be where I am today. And as hard as it is not to be there, not to be present for them, I wouldn't change the fact that I've decided to come over here.
Chapese is now completing a bar training course. Once certified, she plans to practice corporate law in the UK. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
And now here are the results of last week's web poll questions. Last week we asked, what should Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Gold-Masty's priorities be? And you answered with 42% saying housing should be the top of the priority. Next at 34% was water, and third was child welfare at 24%. Our next question was, does your community have an emergency management plan for this year's wildfire season? A majority were not sure if they had one in place at 60%, 31% had said no, and 9% said yes, they had plans in place. And lastly, we asked, are you rooting for the Edmonton Oilers now that they're the last Canadian team standing? 51% said yes they are, 27% said they don't watch hockey, and 22% said no. Thanks to all who took the time to vote. Our next set of questions will be up on our website at aptnnews.ca. We have more news after the break. Stay with us. Starting on East Charlottetown, 8 Halifax, 9 and Sun. Sunny in Happy Valley, Goose Bay at 17, Cartwright 10. St. Jovide 19, Quebec City 18 and partly cloudy. Sunny in Toronto at 18, Peterborough 17 and sun. Wawa 18, Elliott Lake 19 and sunny there. Partly cloudy in Thompson at 13, God's Lake sun and 19. 18 in Winnipeg, Barons River 17. 18 in Regina, Saskatoon 19. 21 in Meadow Lake, Larange 21. Showers and high level at 20, Fort McMurray rain there as well at 30. 30 in Lethbridge, Calgary 27. 22 in Penticton, Campbell River, showers and 18. 20 in Prince George, Smithers 14. Rain in Old Crow at 16, Rock River 5. 25 in Fort Simpson, Trout Lake 22. Tuktoyaktuk 3, Pawlatuck 8. Baker Lake 7, Chesterfield 9. And Iqaluit 3, Clyde River -1. It was years in the making, and after a lot of hard work, APTN launched their channel dedicated solely to Indigenous languages. And this week in Vancouver, APTN executives celebrated that work. APTN's Tina House has that story.
Executives from the Aboriginal People's Television Network, Indigenous influencers, producers and staff were in Vancouver to celebrate not only the 25th anniversary since the network launched, but also the creation of the APTN Indigenous Languages channel, which began last September. The event took place at the Bill Reid Gallery in downtown Vancouver and was hosted by Nouvelle Nationale d'APTN host Kim Sullivan.
For Indigenous people, language is not just communication. It is a way we share our stories. It is a way we share who we are. It is a way that we can make sure that generation after generation understand just our ancestors, our land, our way of knowing.
Now we're taking a giant leap forward. Introducing APTN Languages, North America's first national Indigenous language channel. From dramas to documentaries to movies, APTN Languages is preserving and revitalizing Indigenous cultures.
Monica Ille is the CEO of APTN, and she says she is proud to introduce the new platform that will change the landscape of the broadcast industry and further empower Indigenous people.
Some people lost their language through residential schools, and how they're reclaiming the languages just shows the importance we give to languages, because when you lose your language, you lose a part of your identity. So reclaiming that is key to your future.
Since the launch of APTN in 1999, so many milestones have been reached as the first Indigenous broadcaster in the world.
Since then, APTN has continued to celebrate programming by, for, and about Indigenous peoples. We deliver shows, movies, and documentaries to millions of households across Canada.
Mike Omelas is the Executive Director of Content and Strategy, and he says he is excited to see how this new channel can help revitalize Indigenous languages, many of which are on the verge of extinction.
What a fantastic night. There is so much passion for reclaiming and revitalizing Indigenous languages and support for APTN's new language channel that's broadcasting full-time in a variety of Indigenous languages, more than 17 every year. We're just thrilled to be here and meet producers and encourage them to tell more stories in their language, because there's a home for them now on APTN Languages.
Tamara Bell is a producer who has had many TV shows air on the network. She says she is proud to see APTN leading the way and creating opportunities like never before.
By having APTN there, the language is phenomenal, because it's a preservation for 7 generations forward. So what is lost is now preserved and then can be learned. And so by having that station, it allows people to connect with their language, which is one of our most precious assets in our treasure box.
APTN and APTN Languages are both available to most Canadian households through basic channel packages. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
And that's your daytime newscast for this Monday. We're back again in a few hours for your evening newscasts. From all of us at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho kwana. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next day.